This is The Bagel Report, a podcast exploring Jewish representation and identity in popular culture, with your hosts Esther Kostanowitz and Aaron Ben-Moshe, and now a production of J, the Jewish News of Northern California.
Esther, we have multiple guests in our virtual studio this week.
That's right. It's crowded in here, but we love it.
Today is part of our lead up to the Maisel finale. And we're lucky to have Austin Basis with us. Austin plays Alvin in the finale season of the marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
That's right. He does. And we all know that there's an Alvin who listens to this podcast too, which is my dad. He listens to every episode. Alvin, Al Kostanowitz. So, when I saw that Austin was playing a character named Alvin, I knew that it was going to be a proper tie-in. So thank you, Austin, for coming to share with us a little bit about playing Alvin on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel today.
Well, thank you for having me, and hopefully I'll meet your dad one day. It'll be a meeting of the Alvins, a meeting of the minds.
I'm sure he'd love it. That's right.
Yes, so Austin is an actor, writer, producer, advocate, ally, etc. He's a lifetime member of the Actors Studio, and we're so happy to have you here. And we also have Michael Horwitz, who's a writer and producer of Kanashimi.
I'm only here because of Austin as well, so.
Well, nonetheless, we are happy to celebrate your talent at the end. Also, Kanashimi is a short film that Michael wrote and produced, and it means sorrow or sadness. And Austin is the star of that movie as well. So that's the tie-in, everybody. You're all caught up now.
And so to kick off, we do want to start with you, Austin. Like we mentioned, you are a multi-hyphenate. So how do you most centrally identify? Or are you more of an actor than a writer? Or do you wear different hats depending on the moment?
I identify as an artist because when I learned about Leonardo da Vinci in school, I always kind of immediately thought of myself as like a Renaissance man because I played sports. I was good in school. I drew like Leonardo, but one thing that stood out above everything else and came kind of like floated to the surface after all these other hobbies and loves kind of faded away to the background was acting. So I most identify as an actor, but I never want to deny my artist self and my creativity because I feel as an actor, it's very interpretive and it's just one version of using the same muscles that I would use for writing or drawing or, even playing a sport, but, slightly different part of your brain. But still, I feel like acting is at the forefront, and that's what I've made a living at, for, I guess, over 20 plus years.
When did you know that you were showbiz bound? I read online that said that you were at one point interested in a medical career. Make the joke about the Jewish doctor here. But then you ended up going in a slightly different direction. So you could tell us a little bit about that.
As I was looking towards high schools, I had the choice of choosing between Performing Arts High School in Manhattan, and I lived in South Brooklyn. So that would have been an hour and a half on the train every day, back and forth. And then that school had no teams. They have no sports. So I was like, I wanted to play baseball and I wanted to, play sports and do drama. So I went to a different school in Brooklyn that was probably half as far, but pretty far away. And that was a medical science program. So I was good at math and science. Ironically, as an actor, not so good in history and English or, social studies. But ultimately, when I went to grad school, I had, in high school, I performed in the plays, which were called Sing. It was like a production from every grade would compete against each other, write a play, do songs and kind of perform it in competition with the other grades. It's a big thing in Brooklyn and maybe even in the city in New York. And I also played sports. And when I went to college, I was like, I'm going to go pre-med and major in theater. And slowly, as I took each science class, I got worse and worse grades. I became less and less interested. even to the point where I took psychology and was like, this could tie in. I could be a psych major, have something to fall back on, like my Jewish mother wants, and also have an insight into playing characters. And that also, kind of fell away. And I was encouraged by one of my teachers and said, like, you got to really commit to this if you want to succeed. And so I called my parents and had that discussion of I'm going to major in theater and, ultimately go to grad school for acting. And they paid for undergrad and I'm still paying for grad school.
I love that it was always this thing that you wanted to do, and you were always just trying to figure out how to make it a backup, and then using your bravery to just say, this is what I really want. And having that support from your family to say, okay, we're going to support you in this, I think is like really huge. Because a lot of the time you just hear that story of, I'm just going to do this by myself. So it's great.
Yeah, I was lucky in that respect. I mean, my mom was hesitant, and I think it was like early junior year that I kind of had to commit and, to fill out all the requirements. And so in undergrad, and I did a performance, ironically, of Brighton Beach Memoirs. And I am about 10 minutes where I grew up was about 10 minutes from Brighton Beach in Coney Island, or less if, you're driving fast. But that Neil Simon connection is what kind of full circled me back to working in Maisel and reading those lines in script and feeling back in my body and in my element and feeling that naturally I was attuned and kind of equipped and gravitated towards that dialogue and towards that snappy way of talking and that kind of New York 1960s, 1950s vibe.
You totally read our mind and you totally read our segues. Have you hacked into our Google Doc? Is that what's happening right now?
No, I just put it into GP or what is it called?
GPT. Yeah.
GPT.
Actually,
and,
I'm an avatar of ChatGPT. I'm actually not a real person.
Okay.
So there's that.
Wow, you look real.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's marvelous.
Zoom
the
does
AI
wonders,
these days.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. I have a ton of filters on to look this glamorous for sure. So, yeah. So Maisel, we are one of the things that struck me when I was looking at your bio online is this fact that you grew up really close to the Wonder Wheel to Coney Island, and I don't know how much of a Maisel fan you were before you were a member of the cast. But, there was that amazing scene at the beginning of last season that took place all on the Wonder Wheel and, people yelling at each other and all of that. And obviously it's an era that you did not witness yourself in your actual history. But can you tell us a little bit about how that scene resonated for you to create a scene around something that was so familiar to you from childhood?
Well, as soon as I saw Coney Island in the, how they do a lot of walk and talk, one shot, oneers, and they did an establishing shot early on when the whole family was yapping away and coming into Coney Island from the boardwalk. And, Coney Island over the years has kind of had ups and downs. And in, more recent years, it's kind of revived and repainted and kind of rebranded as this classic, amusement park. When I was growing up, it's kind of a little shady and, run down, and probably shooting the episode there. But it was so thrilling for me to watch and kind of know that, that's basically 5 minutes from, where I grew up. I used to have like class trips at the end of the year when there was nothing left to do. We'd go to, Coney Island, go on the Cyclone. The Wonder Wheel scene was interesting because I'm like, they're obviously not on the best cars, because the best cars or, kind of compartments in the Wonder Wheel swing down at certain points. And there's stable cars on one kind of ring. And then there's a whole nother ring that has these like railing things that allow the compartment you're in to like almost like free fall for like 2 seconds. And then you swing back and forth. It takes like, a couple minutes for you to stop. And then by the time you get around to the other side and stop, you're swinging again. I'm like, that would have been crazy if one of them was in that and had to have this conversation. I was like, obviously, yeah.
It sounded like they should have had you as a location consultant as well.
Yeah.
And, consult on the what do they call that? The aerodynamics of the cars on the Wonder Wheel.
Yes.
But it's probably much harder to shoot on one of those cars.
They shot it in a studio, but it was like, what I found out on working on the show is that the detail and the attention to detail and the skill level of the production design and the costume design and the location scout stuff, they're all, it's just, I don't think that there's anything more detailed and better on TV. And they're so good at it that even props are sometimes actual antiques from 1960 or 1959 or whatever the season was. It's pretty amazing. So I was like, they're sticking pretty close to the accuracy of what the Wonder Wheel was at that time.
Were you a fan of the show before you joined the show yourself?
Yeah, of course. And like I've had this experience where I've auditioned for shows that I love and I've gotten cast in a couple shows. I haven't gotten cast in all the shows I love, but I think knowing the vibe and the pace and the tone of a show and knowing it intimately helps a lot. I even still had to watch an episode just to kind of like just get that in my ear so that I knew the pace, especially for a guy like Alvin that's going to be pushing the pace of the scenes. I wasn't, I was in charge and I had to, do that, and I had to show that in the audition. So I feel like, well, I was a huge fan. I was, I had a couple other shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm and Homeland that I was huge fans of as well. And so I feel like those, being a fan of TV in general, but huge fans of specific shows that I've gotten cast in, helps me immensely to kind of at least get the part and then ultimately play with the characters. The difficult part is I've come to know all these characters intimately as an audience member. And in this, scenario, I'm supposed to not know Midge Maisel. Like I'm supposed to treat her as a stranger. And so that was more of the challenge of like, treating this person like I don't know their name. I'd never seen them before. And following that arc for the character and getting to know her through the scenes. That was
right.
That was, there's two sides of that always.
Yeah. One of the things that we obviously saw, and I just wanted to backtrack for a second in case our listeners are not aware, because they're listening to you on the audio. So Austin plays Alvin, who is the head of the writer's room at the Gordon Ford Show, which features very prominently in the episodes in this season. So, I'm wondering, because, and you said it's important to get the kind of pacing in your ear, and that's particularly probably important with an Amy Sherman Palladino joint, as they say. Nobody says that. But with Amy Sherman Palladino's shows, there's always this rapid fire kind of like staccato kind of rapid fire dialogue. And I remember I was just watching one of the recent episodes with the writer's room and one of the recently released episodes, and there's at least one scene where everybody says the name of the character they're talking to at the end. So it's like, what are you thinking, Midge? I don't know, Gordon. Where are the jokes, Alvin? It's just like that kind of like pop, 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 pop. So is this the fastest dialogue you've ever done? And is there a vocal exercise that you use to ready you for an Amy Sherman Palladino joint?
Yes. It's as actors, when you do theater, you do plays, you do what's called the speed through before. Well, I've done a speed through before every performance, just so you drill the lines and dialogue, and you do it. When I did my thesis was like a half-hour performance, and so you could do that dialogue in less than 10 minutes. You go through as fast as you can, and so there's always that old kind of phrase, faster, louder, funnier. That applies for Maisel. And then even when we shot it, Amy, Dan, or some of the other guest directors, actually, I think the first person that said it was Scott Ellis, who is one of the guest directors who has directed in other seasons. We would get it. We would get the scene and he's like, that's it. He's like, all right, now let's Maisel it up, and it would just mean go faster and, as fast as you can, basically. So a speed through as an actor doing theater really, and even on auditions and running through material before you rehearse or before you shoot it, doing a speed through does you justice, especially if you know the lines and if you know it by rote like that. then you could actually just relax and not have to worry about what words, because this show is not improv at all. It's word perfect. So even in the audition, they say, this is a word perfect show. Don't make anything up. Say every word on the page. And so that is intimidating as an actor that gets a day with the material. The audition was like 5. The first audition was 5 scenes. The callback was 8 scenes. So pretty much all of my material in the first episode was in the audition. And so not only memorizing it, but being able to know it so well that you kind of have to anticipate the end of someone else's lines. Humans don't necessarily like respond that quickly. People talk fast. If you've been to New York, it's a rude awakening when I went back to New York, seeing all my old friends talking 90 miles an hour. I'm like, oh my God, people talk faster than Maisel. But it's the cues, picking up the cues that really punches the comedy and the melody. And like you said, the staccato of, because it's like a musical without the songs, even though they do have songs sometimes.
They really leaned into the musicality in a very literal sense this season, to mixed reviews from people. We'll talk about that in our upcoming episode where we talk about the rest of the series. But yeah.
I love it. And I love the way you talk about it, because I feel like that's what we see when we're watching it. So for you to share that inside information is like, oh, that's really great. And one of the things that I noticed this season, to know, no one could have predicted this, or maybe they could have, but I just think it's so interesting that the writer's room of a show is such a highlight in this series as a writer's strike is going on. And I wonder, did you learn anything about being a writer while you were an actor playing a writer on a streaming show?
As a writer, knowing how long they've worked on this and how ambitious they were this season, and then also talking to my writer friends that used to write for late night TV, how close that resembled their experience, and the pressure and the anxiety and the tension that lives in your job every day to be funny and to come up with something funny from the day's events, or, from the news, or just from everyday life. One of my friends, Matt Flanagan, used to write for David Letterman, and he said the 20-and-1 bit of me going 20-and-1 and then everyone kind of scrambling, he was like, that brought back nightmares for him. And so like that, I feel like that type of stuff is understanding and feeling like on the easy end of it, because I'm on the commanding end of it, not the receiving end of it. That was a little more less stressful for me, but in order to earn that position, I would have had to work my way up and do what everyone else was doing. Like when I worked for Sid Caesar, the character worked for Sid Caesar, I'd have to do that. Although that was a sketch show, so it wasn't like joke. So I figured, in the estimation of every night, 5 nights a week, that they would have to come up with anywhere between 10 and 15 jokes for that night. And get it all approved by Gordon, and the repetition and strain of that every day. Talk about Sisyphus and, pushing a stone up a mountain. I would not choose that life under any circumstances.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was, when I heard about 20-and-1, I thought that was just a marvelous concept. And it also filled me with excitement as kind of a structure to use for writing, but also with incredible and crippling anxiety. So I'm sure that there's a lot of that. You mentioned Sid Caesar, and, obviously your character, Alvin, has worked with the greats, and we're wondering what comedians and entertainers you were drawn to growing up. Did you find that there was a very a Jewish undercurrent to the comedy and the patter of the comedy? And how did that intersect with your Jewish identity?
Oh, well, growing up in a Jewish family in Brooklyn, going to Jewish sleepaway camp, and having parents that appreciated the arts and comedy and also, musical theater, I literally grew up on Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks, was one of the ones, especially Spaceballs was so formative. But also I was talking to someone, I was like, the only Frankenstein I knew was Young Frankenstein. I didn't know anything other version of
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. I know, Frankenstein. Yeah, Frankenstein, right, exactly. That was the only Frankenstein or, version of that, lore I'd known. Listening to like Jackie Mason was a huge thing. And then there was like, it's Brooklyn and there's like 6 degrees of, Jews from New York, I guess. And so it's like somehow Jackie Mason's brother was a cantor at a synagogue that my friend's family went to and got bar mitzvah. So it was like, and he's the same guy as Jackie Mason. He just sings in a synagogue, which was, yes, of course, which was hysterical because then he gives the talk afterwards and he's talking about, the Torah and all this stuff, but he sounds like Jackie Mason. And even like, Joan Rivers and, that kind of energy, style, and comedy was basically, what I kind of mimicked and was influenced by what was around me. And it was a loud Jewish family, very much like the dinner table. There was a kids' table, much like this season in the Maisel household. I think that, volume, that energy, that, I called it Hebonics, but it's like this, kind of version of, using Yiddish in, or Hebrew in your like in the middle of sentences and your talk was like sprinkled throughout my childhood and very influential and even inspired me and, caught me, I had an awesome conversation with my grandmother shortly before she passed away, where she gave me basically a crib sheet of all these Yiddish words. Like, so she gave me like, coffee talk was kind of around then. And so I was like, what is verklempt? Like what is, and she kind of went down for mish, for chatted, for klempt, for blunged. Like she went down all the fuzz. And she gave me the laundry list of like, and then I tried to, like we did my friend just reminded me, we did this thing called Oi MTV Raps when I was doing sketch comedy, which basically was, religious Jewish Orthodox kind of guys, kind of doing hip hop. I tried, that's what I interviewed. I was like, give me all the words you can and I'll try to use it into like kind of like hip hop talk, hip hop slang. But yeah, it's very, very influential. And that's why this, kind of when I read this, helped my friend who actually was in that sketch comedy group with me. I helped him work on the audition for Maisel. And then I saw, and I was reading Alvin mostly. And I'm like, something about like, this feels right. This feels, I can like, this is a character and a world that I could play in. And that feels like, again, Neil Simon. And that's the first author playwright that I really connected with as an actor in college, that I could feel like I could do a monologue or do a scene from that and feel like I could be myself.
So are you saying that your friend was auditioning for it and you were reading Alvin to help your friend audition for it? Was your friend cast, and what's the status of your friendship right now?
No, we still write together, which is the comic book graphic novel that I've been working on called The Kinetics, about the kids with disabilities that are superheroes by virtue of their illnesses and disabilities. He's the artist behind that, but he also is, kind of a great comic mind, and he's an amazing improver. And so when he kind of has to do like more weighty stuff, I mean, he's experienced, he's, union actor, has TV credits and film credits and stuff, and he's done theater, but it's like, he just always kind of, if we have time, because sometimes you don't have time to work on it with friend, we Zoomed, I read the scene and he worked on it, and then he, kind of taped it with a friend the next day. And I was just like, you should go faster. I was like, it's faster. Every time it was like faster, faster, faster. And then I said at the end, I'm like, could I ask my agents, could you send me the breakdown? And could I reach out to my agents? I asked his permission, obviously. Long story short, he did not get the role and I got my role. His role was cast by a named talent guy. So,
got it.
Tough to compete with that.
Yeah. I wouldn't be me if I didn't loop back to something you said about camp, that you went to Jewish summer camp. So I need to ask which one.
Okay. I went to Camp Monroe in upstate New York.
I have heard of Camp Monroe. I'm a Camp Ramah in the Berkshires person. I know Michael was Camp Ramah when he was here in the Ramah, California in Ojai. and I think has found a new camp in Oregon. Is that right?
Yeah, we just found a new camp in Oregon, but I have to backtrack just a little bit because, Austin, we know each other pretty well, but, I had a very similar parallel experience as you and your upbringing, not just with the Jewish summer camp, but just with the noisy Jewish table, the kids' table, all that, just the West Coast version of it, So, and now that we live up in Oregon, we found a new summer camp here that's called BB Camp, and it's great because it has something that Camp Ma in California did not have, which is a lake, and so it's absolutely gorgeous. And we just found it last weekend. We were up there for like a family, weekend retreat kind of thing, and that's our new camp. But yeah,
great. Jewish summer camp is so important, y'all. That's this podcast was not paid for by Jewish summer camp yet.
But we are still all a product of Jewish summer camp.
That's right. Erin, what summer camp were you?
I went to Tamarack in Michigan.
Okay, great. So now we have our camp affiliations clearly stated. Michael, I want to ask you a couple of questions about your short film. So I'm just wondering if you can give us like the log line of the movie, tell us what it's about, and then tell us a little bit about why you cast Austin in this role.
Absolutely. So the film is called Kanashimi, which is a Japanese word for grief or sorrow. It's essentially about a character named Adam who is going through, a rough time after losing his father and is about to become a father himself, and is just trying to figure out, how does he deal with all these pieces, moving forward. And in that process, finds this mysterious item on the beach, which turns out to be an old baseball glove. And the baseball glove becomes sort of a MacGuffin, if you will, for basically finding a sense of, not purpose, but a sense of relief and hope that we are all connected in the most unlikely and sometimes most random of ways. And that can bring healing and love and hope. And the way that I came to Austin, and I'm going to backtrack just for a second because, our experiences are so similar. Austin, you probably don't know this about me, but I was also going down the acting path in high school. I did drama. I was on stage. I did not have the chutzpah or the confidence to keep going with it. I also learned that I give direction better than I take it. And so I kind of left, being performing to going to behind the camera. And I haven't left that path since. But very similarly, I had, my Jewish parents who, were like, so when are you going to give up this little like hobby thing and go become a doctor or a lawyer or something that makes, that makes money? And and I said, I'm probably not. So just deal. And it took them a while to come around and support, but I had a really strong bond connection with my own father. And when he passed away in 2019, and it was about 6-7 months before COVID hit, I was a wreck. I mean, it really threw a curveball into my life. And, we had a very special bond over things like baseball and Jewish community and all that kind of stuff. He was not a big arts supporter or fan the way like Austin, like your parents and others were. So there was always a struggle for us in terms of like, I want to go pursue this creative endeavor and, I want to be an artist. And he was an accountant. You can't get more opposite than that. But we came to Austin because my producer, Todd Felderstein, is a mutual friend and knows Austin from Actors Theater. And he, when he auditioned, it just clicked, and it really speaks to Austin's talent. I mean, this is mega talent that we have here. And I'm not just doing that just to prop you up. I mean, you can go and do Maisel and have that rhythm and that cadence and that sharp dialogue, and then turn around and come to something, this small little short film of mine called Kanashimi, and deliver a very powerful, understated, dramatic performance. That's not easy. And so that is a testament to what you can do and to your growth as an artist. So I am beyond grateful that I have such an incredible leading actor in the film.
He does an amazing job. Austin, you do an amazing job. I was very struck by the quiet and the internal kind of the suffering that we could see on your face and through your posture and how you moved in that character. And as somebody who has lost a parent also, I know what that grief can be, especially that first 6 months. Michael, you were talking about the 6 months, and that was, I think, also the point at which this character is struggling. It's a point at which there's also going to be a new baby in the house. And so the character is also struggling with that. And Austin, could you tell us what it was like to play this kind of a role of a man so steeped and in some ways also stooped in grief and so much family transition?
Well, it was, first of all, obviously an honor to kind of portray a version of Michael, of his kind of bout with grief, for losing his dad. And a couple things really connected with me in the writing, but also in the story in general. The first thing is the bond of baseball and how that connected in the story, the cultures, but in essence, the core of that is the relationship between father and son, and also how that kind of bond is very common among American men, and sometimes the only thing they connect with to their fathers. I am lucky enough to have other, my dad appreciates acting and film and TV and stuff. So that is not about just father, son. There's a thing you share, a love you share together that makes the love you have between each other that much deeper. And so that really connected for me and kind of was my entry point. And then kind of exploring a character that I haven't really had. I'm usually the, kind of the optimistic guy, the guy that peps the main character up or is the comic relief doing comedies. And when I do dramas, I'm kind of I serve that purpose, the loyal best friend, and to kind of be the, the main focus and to have a story that is an internal struggle, but externalized by the way the film is, laid out. And kind of, in a way, kind of really almost yanked out of Adam, like a tooth being pulled, and to connect to, the people I've lost. It just so happened to be, we were filming it during a time where basically 4 of my best friends in the world lost their fathers within a year. And it was a crazy time when it was just that slap in the face of honestly, doing the film made me appreciate and cherish my connection with my own father more so and not take it for granted. But yeah, definitely for the, when we did the Kickstarter, we did an Indiegogo to raise some money for it. And
it was actually Seed and Spark, not Indiegogo.
Oh, Seed and Spark. I want to give credit where credit's due. It's Seed and Spark. So we did a kickoff and we had to dedicate the film to someone. And I, part of my thing was my most recent loss was my grandfather. And so kind of connecting with that grief and just remembering all the things that, we shared and that we don't have now. It's kind of holding the present with the past. And I feel the connection in between is what you feel for the lack of, that what you had. And so that really helped me. I do a lot of exercises as a method, sensory actor, studio actor that try to connect me with the character or bring as much of my life into the character. So it's less acting and it's more real. And one of the assignments Adam has is to write a letter to his dad. And so I wrote a letter to my dad as if he was gone, right? That's a kind of an exercise that people do, an as if kind of thing. And then I also wrote a letter to my grandfather that is gone, and kind of it was just a way of connecting to my dad, which is a specific relationship, but also thinking and specifically remembering sensorially, what I used to, do with my grandfather.
The actor who plays Kaito, who is basically, the man on the other side of the world, who was the owner of the baseball glove. His father was a famous Japanese baseball player for the Tokyo Giants. And he was going to also become a baseball player and couldn't take the pressure of being in the shadow of his own father, so he became an actor. So things just go around.
Oh, wow.
Michael.
Yes.
Where can people see Kanashimi?
We're out on the festival circuit now. We just screened at the Pasadena Film Festival just last week. We had a great screening, with a lot of other great films. There was easily 100 and 150 people there, I believe. We were nominated for Best Short Film at the festival. We didn't win, so it is not yet available to the public. But if you're someone who is in the film festivals and whatnot, keep your eye on that because we will definitely be at more, coming up and over the summer for the rest of the year. And then after that, hopefully, if we can get some distribution or not, it'll find a place to live online.
Right. Wonderful. We really wish you the best of luck. It's so hard to get your work out there. Although I don't know if the streaming has made it easier or harder. You could argue for both, I think.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
Yes, it totally is. It totally is.
I want to give you this moment, Austin, because by the time this episode will come out, the final episode of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, like the final episode will be out there.
The last one ever. And it's
that's such a crazy thing, at least for me to think about, because I love the show so much. And I'm sure it's like you said, you're a fan. I just want to know, like what will you miss most about your Maisel experience? And what was that final day like where you guys, that final time you were all in the Gordon Ford set together? What does this feel like now that it's over?
Well, it's weird because it aired so quickly and it took so long to do. We did it from they shot from February to November last year. I started in March and went to November, and it's and then waited December, January, February, March until April, 5 months to see anything, or more than 5 months. So now all of a sudden I've seen all these episodes, and I haven't seen the next episode either, or the last episode. So I've only experienced it. And so honestly, I can only talk about, that experience. But there was something about the experience that was simultaneously challenging because of the dialogue and the pressure and living up to the quality that had already been established by the show and the writers and production. The fun of it, the thrill, the kind of connections, the new connections I've made with, friends, and that kind of camaraderie we had. I think Amy talked about in an interview that we just started hanging out in the writer's room like real writers. And I have these pipe dreams of a spin-off series of just the writer's room and the stories of, people trying to make things funny from the tragedies of the 1960s. And those days, like a Mad Men meets Larry Sanders, kind of like a late night talk show. And it could be topical. So many of the issues, even anti-Semitism, stuff like that is, popping up back into the culture, women's rights, people of color. There's so many things that we could get to that I'm if we can get those guys back in a room again, we can have a great show. So it's a lot of the bonds with those, that camaraderie. And the idea that you're stepping into television history in a sense, where this show launched Amazon or Prime Video pretty much as their first original series that, award winning, kind of go through the gamut of awards. It has over 20 Emmy awards. And that was before I even got there. So wait until after. I'm just kidding. But for me, at least, it was so thrilling to kind of be a fan, be part of it, and not let those two get in the way. And then kind of, in a sense, I've only been a part of it for 8 months or 8 episodes. And so to be a fly on the wall, to watch these actors and these producers and creators close the chapter and see what they've created and the end to their thing, it's kind of like the last day of camp, to pull it back to where everyone's crying and everyone's we're never going to have this again, and then all of a sudden it happens next year. But it's like the last day of the last year of camp. My camp is closed now. So it's
your camp is closed.
There was a last day of the last summer it was open that, you're saying goodbye to everyone. And, and I think it's what we talked about with nostalgia and loss of you're saying goodbye to the experience you just had. And, even if there's another summer at camp, it's not going to be the same. And, you're never going to relive it again. You just have it in your heart and in your memories. And so I feel like that was really what my experience was kind of, watching this and participating in the final day of shooting, at 4 a.m. on on Saturday, November, I think it was 6th or 5th or 6th,
Wow.
watching it close off.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love you're comparing it to summer camp, obviously.
Yeah.
That should be clear. And also that you did that in such a way that everybody knows you're not acting like you went to summer camp. You definitely went to summer camp.
Yeah.
And before you guys go, thank you so much for being here and talking about your art with us. We really appreciate it. We love having the opportunity to ask people and talk to people about what they love and their experience in front of the camera and behind it. But before you go, we always ask our guests this because we are the Bagel Report. Michael and Austin, what kind of bagel are you?
Sesame.
All right.
Is there a particular reason? One of the things we ask is like, if it could be a bagel that you identify with the most, like if a bagel were playing you in the story of your life, what kind of bagel would it be? Or it's the bagel that you most like to eat. And we'd love to know why.
You're not going to know why, because I don't know why. I just love sesame bagels. And, there really are not great bagels here up in Bend, Oregon. There's a couple bagel shops, but I make sure that every time we go down to LA, I hit up Western Bagel for a proper sesame bagel with a little bit of cream cheese and some tomato and cucumber on it. That's just my thing.
I am, and I choose the Renaissance of bagels, which is the Renaissance man of bagels, which is the everything bagel.
That makes sense.
And it's just because, and it goes back to like choosing acting. It's like I've kind of been pretty good at a lot of things and had a lot of like, interest and hobbies and focuses in my life. But, acting was the one that I felt like I could possibly be great at or really good at. So it's like, I feel like all the ingredients on an everything bagel are all those other things that I could still enjoy and still have as a hobby, but eat with a lox spread and, maybe some red onions. Or there's another thing I love is bagel. And this is not kosher. Sorry, guys, but bagel with an everything bagel with cream cheese and bacon. For people that are not kosher, that is a delicious crispy bacon. Or if you're kosher, like, crispy pastrami, like a pastrami BLT. It's
if you're really kosher, you'll have it with vegan cream cheese.
Yes, exactly.
And vegan bacon. Yeah.
Yes,
there's lots of opportunities in there.
Right, exactly.
Thank you for that
We love
culinary recommendation, and also for being here with us and sharing your experiences with us and with our listeners. We appreciate you both so much.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
This has been The Bagel Report, a production of Jay, the Jewish News of Northern California, and a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network. Thank you to Lev Gringaz, our producer from Jew Folk Inc., David A.M. Walensky and Andrew Essenston, and Danny Lipsky for creating our logo. You can find us wherever podcasts are listened to. Connect with us on social, on Twitter, at Esther K, at Eben Moshe, and at The Bagel Report, on Instagram at Esther Kostanowitz, at Eben Moshe, and TBR the Pod, and by emailing us at thebagelreport@gmail.com. Now go and watch something interesting, and maybe we'll talk about it next time on The Bagel Report.